I am 26 years old. For most of my life, my dad was my hero. That changed after my mom passed away. He seemed to shrink, to become someone I didn't recognize. When he married Linda 2 years later, the distance between us grew into a canyon. He wasn't a bad man. Not in the way you see in movies. He was just weak, easily led, and more concerned with keeping his new life smooth than with honoring the old one. The one that included me. The one that was built inside the walls of my childhood home. That house was everything. It was my mother's dream. The place she'd filled with light and laughter and the smell of baking bread. Every scuff on the floorboards, every pencil mark on the doorframe measuring my height, was a piece of her. After she was gone, the house became a museum of our life together. My dad and I rattled around in it for a while, ghosts in our own home. When he announced he and Linda were moving to a smaller apartment, a part of me was relieved. Maybe the memories were too heavy for him, but another part of me was terrified. What would happen to the house? He must have sensed my fear, because he called me over one Tuesday afternoon. He was sitting at the old oak dining table, the one my mom had spent months restoring. He looked tired, older than his 55 years. Linda was out, which was a small mercy. He slid a single ornate brass key across the table. It was heavy, worn smooth from years of use. It was the original front door key. "I know things have been hard between us, honey," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I hadn't heard in years. It sounded like regret. "Your mother, she would have wanted you to have this. The house is yours now. A fresh start for you." I stared at the key, then at him. My heart was doing a strange, hopeful flutter. Was this real? Was he finally seeing me again? "What do you mean it's mine?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I mean it's yours," he repeated, managing a small smile. "Linda and I are officially moved out. The deed is being transferred. I wanted you to have the key first. I want you to go there to feel it. It's your home again." Tears welled in my eyes. I couldn't stop them. All the anger, all the resentment I'd been holding on to seemed to melt away in that moment. He was giving me back the most important piece of my mother. The most important piece of me. I reached out and took the key. Its coolness was a solid, grounding presence in my trembling hand. "Thank you, Dad," I said, and for the first time in a long time I meant it. I hugged him. A quick, awkward embrace, but it felt like a bridge being built over that canyon between us. He told me to go, to see it for myself. He said he had some final packing to do at the apartment. I practically ran out of there, clutching the key so tightly my knuckles were white. Hope was a dangerous, brilliant thing, and it was singing in my veins. I drove to the old neighborhood. The trees were bigger, the houses a little more worn, but it was the same. It was home. I parked across the street and just looked at the house for a long moment. The pale yellow siding, the dark green shutters, the porch swing my mom and I used to sit on during summer evenings. It was all there, waiting for me. My hands were shaking as I walked up the stone path. I slid the key into the lock. It felt like a sacred act. The tumblers clicked, a familiar, comforting sound. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Not the familiar scent of lemon polish and my mother's rose perfume, but something else. Something sterile, like a hotel. New paint. The hallway was empty. The photos of our family that had lined the walls were gone. The scuff marks were gone, painted over. I walked into the living room. It wasn't empty. It was filled with furniture I'd never seen before. A sleek, modern gray sofa. A glass coffee table. A minimalist rug on the newly polished floors. It looked like a magazine. A beautiful, soulless magazine. None of our old furniture was there. Not my mother's favorite armchair. Not the bookshelf my grandfather built. A cold knot of confusion tightened in my stomach. Maybe this was part of the gift. A truly fresh start. My dad had it professionally cleaned and staged for me. It was a strange thought, but I clung to it. He was trying in his own clumsy way. I wandered through the downstairs rooms. The dining room where he'd given me the key was now home to a stark white table and 6 matching chairs. The kitchen had new stainless steel appliances. Everything gleamed. Everything was wrong. I headed for the back door, thinking maybe I could get some fresh air on the patio. As my hand touched the doorknob, I heard a voice from behind me. "Can I help you?" I spun around. A woman was standing in the doorway that led from the kitchen. She was in her 30s, dressed in a sharp business suit, holding a tablet. She looked at me with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. Sorry, I stammered, holding up the key as if it were a shield. "This is my house. My dad just gave it to me." The woman's expression didn't soften. A small, polite smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile that was meant to dismiss you. "I'm afraid there's been some kind of misunderstanding," she said, her voice smooth and professional. "No, there's no misunderstanding," I insisted, my voice gaining a little strength. "My name is Clara. This was my childhood home. My father, Mark, just gave it to me. He and his wife moved out." The woman's smile tightened. She took a step forward, her heels clicking softly on the pristine floor. "My name is Jessica," she said, "and I bought this house from Mark 2 weeks ago. We close on the sale tomorrow morning. This furniture is just the staging for the final walkthrough." The world tilted on its axis. Her words didn't make sense. They were just sounds, clattering against the inside of my skull. "Bought the house? Close tomorrow?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, that's not possible. He gave me the key. He told me it was mine." The hope that had been singing in my veins turned into a sickening, icy slush. Jessica's professional patience was clearly wearing thin. "Look, I don't know what kind of game your father is playing, but this property is legally mine, pending the final transaction. I have the purchase agreement right here." She tapped on her tablet, then turned the screen toward me. And there it was. A legally binding document. A purchase and sale agreement. I saw the address of my home. I saw the purchase price. And I saw the seller's signature. It was my father's familiar, messy scrawl. Below it was the buyer's signature. "Jessica." The price listed on the document jumped out at me. It was low. Shockingly, insultingly low. It was less than half of what the houses in this neighborhood were selling for. It was a fire sale price. "I don't understand," I whispered, the key suddenly feeling like a lead weight in my hand. It wasn't a gift. It was a prop. A cruel piece of theater designed for an audience of one. "I think you need to leave," Jessica said, her voice no longer polite. It was firm, unwavering. "The final walkthrough with the bank is in an hour. I can't have you here." Humiliation washed over me in a hot, suffocating wave. I was a trespasser in my own home. I looked at this woman, this stranger who was about to own every memory I had, and I felt nothing but a profound sense of bewilderment. My father had done this. He had looked me in the eye, told me he loved me, and handed me a lie. "The key," I said, looking down at it. "Why would he give me the key?" Jessica sighed, a sound of pure annoyance. "I have no idea. Maybe it's a spare he forgot to turn over. Frankly, his family drama is not my concern. My concern is this house, which I am legally purchasing. Now, please, I need you to go." I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. I just turned and walked out the front door, leaving it open behind me. I didn't look back. I got into my car, the engine roaring to life in the quiet suburban street. I drove away from my home, from the stranger who now owned it, and from the smoking crater where my relationship with my father used to be. The brass key was still clutched in my hand, its edges digging into my palm. It was a lie I could hold, a solid, tangible piece of his betrayal. My first instinct was to drive to his apartment and scream at him, to demand an explanation. But what was the point? He had already given me his explanation, a key and a fairy tale. The truth was in that purchase agreement on Jessica's tablet. I drove to the one place I knew I could fall apart without judgment. Sarah opened the door to her small apartment before I had even finished knocking. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "Clara? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice laced with concern. I couldn't form words. I just opened my hand and showed her the key. "He gave it to me," I choked out. "He told me the house was mine." I collapsed onto her sofa and told her everything. The emotional meeting with my dad, the hope, the drive to the house, the sterile furniture, and the final brutal confrontation with Jessica, the new owner. Sarah listened patiently, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, and finally to pure, unadulterated rage on my behalf. "He did what?" she exclaimed when I finished. "He sold your mom's house and then pretended to give it to you as a gift? That's not just weak, Clara. That's cruel, that's monstrous." Her anger was a strange comfort. It validated my own. It made me feel less like I was going crazy. "I don't understand why, Sarah," I said, wiping at the tears that were now streaming down my face. "Why would he do that? Why would he lie in such a horrible way?" "Money," she said, her voice flat and certain. "It's always about money with him, isn't it? He probably needed cash fast and didn't have the guts to tell you he was selling your inheritance." "But the price," I said, remembering the number on the screen. It was so low. He could have gotten twice that easily. "Why sell it for so little?" Sarah sat down next to me, her brow furrowed in thought. "That is weird," she admitted. "A quick sale usually means a lower price, but half price? Something isn't right about that. It's almost like he wanted to get rid of it for any price he could get." I felt a new feeling begin to bubble up through the grief and humiliation. It was a cold, hard anger. He hadn't just sold my home. He had practically given it away. He had devalued my mother's legacy, treated it like it was worthless. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I have to call him," I said. "I have to hear him say it." "Are you sure?" Sarah asked gently. "You don't have to put yourself through that." "I do," I said, my voice hardening. "He doesn't get to hide. He has to face me." I pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking, but my resolve was solidifying. I found his number and pressed call. It rang twice before he picked up. "Clara," he said, his voice cheerful, sickeningly so. "Did you go to the house? Isn't it wonderful?" The cheerful tone was like a slap in the face. It was all part of the act. The performance wasn't over yet. I took another shaky breath. "I went to the house, Dad," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "And? What did you think?" He prodded, oblivious. "I think you're a liar," I said, the words coming out sharp and venomous. "I met the new owner, Dad. Her name is Jessica." There was a sudden, deafening silence on the other end of the line. The cheerful facade evaporated. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to figure out his next move. "What are you talking about?" he finally said, his voice a poor imitation of confusion. "It's your house, I told you." "Stop it," I snapped, my voice rising. "Just stop lying. I saw the sales agreement. I saw your signature. You sold my home. You sold Mom's home. And then you had the nerve to hand me a key and pretend you were giving me a gift." The silence stretched on. I waited, my heart pounding against my ribs. I wanted him to confess, to apologize, to show an ounce of remorse. Instead, his tone shifted. The fake confusion was replaced by a weary, condescending sigh. "Oh, that," he said, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum over a broken toy. "It's complicated, Clara. It's a temporary arrangement. For tax purposes." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was still lying, weaving a new, more elaborate fiction to cover the old one. "Tax purposes?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "Jessica is just holding it for you," he said, his voice gaining a false confidence. It's a way to transfer the asset without incurring a huge tax burden. It's all perfectly legal. It's for your benefit. You're overreacting. Gaslighting. He was trying to make me feel like I was the one who was crazy, like I was the one who didn't understand. The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. For my benefit? I shot back. You sold my mother's house to a complete stranger for half its value for my benefit? How stupid do you think I am? You're getting emotional, he said, his voice turning cold and dismissive. You don't understand these things. It's business. It's handled. The house is yours, just not on paper right now. You need to trust me. Trust him. The word was a bitter joke. I will never trust you again, I said, my voice breaking with the force of my anger and pain. You stood there and lied to my face. You let me believe you were finally being a father to me again. It was all a game to you. That's not fair, he said, his voice rising in manufactured indignation. I was trying to do something nice for you, and this is the thanks I get? You're being incredibly ungrateful. Ungrateful. The accusation was so absurd, so twisted that I almost laughed. He had stolen my inheritance, humiliated me, and now he was calling me ungrateful. That was it. The last thread of hope that my old dad was still in there somewhere snapped. I'm done, I said, my voice flat and empty. We are done. I hung up the phone before he could reply. I stared at the blank screen, my whole body trembling with a rage so intense it made me feel dizzy. Sarah put a comforting hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Clara, she said softly. He called me ungrateful, I whispered, the word leaving a vile taste in my mouth. He told me I was overreacting. He's a coward, she said fiercely. He's trying to manipulate you because he got caught. Don't let him. I straightened up, a cold resolve settling deep in my bones. He was not going to get away with this. He had underestimated me. He thought I was just an emotional girl who would cry and eventually get over it. He was wrong. What did you say about the price again? Sarah asked, pulling me back to the practicalities. You're sure it was about half of what it's worth? I'm positive, I said. The house next door sold for almost $1 million last year. He sold ours for $400,000. That makes no sense, she said, shaking her head. Unless the buyer was special. Unless there was a reason to give them such a good deal. A new, ugly thought began to form in my mind. The buyer, Jessica. She had been so cool, so professional. But what if she wasn't just a random stranger? What if she was part of it? I need to find out who she is, I said, my mind starting to work. And I need to find out why he sold it so cheap. There has to be more to this. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. Okay, so what's the first step? We need information. Public records, right? Right, I said. I felt a flicker of purpose amidst the wreckage of my emotions. He thought this was over. He thought he had won. But this was just the beginning. He had given me a key to a house that wasn't mine. Now I was going to find the key to unlocking his lies. The next morning, I was at the county records office. The building was old and smelled of dust and paper. I felt out of place in my jeans and sweater among the lawyers and paralegals in their suits. But I was determined. I filled out the forms, paid the fee, and waited. An hour later, a clerk handed me a copy of the preliminary deed transfer for my mother's house. It confirmed everything Jessica had told me. The seller, Mark. The buyer, Jessica. The price, $400,000. But there was one new piece of information. Jessica's full name. Jessica Albright. The name meant nothing to me. I took the papers and went back to my car, my mind racing. Who was Jessica Albright? Why her? I pulled out my phone and did what any person in the 21st century would do. I searched for her on social media. Her profiles were mostly private, but her main profile picture showed her standing with a group of people at a family barbecue. She was smiling, arm in arm with an older woman. I zoomed in on the picture. My blood ran cold. The woman next to Jessica was Linda, my stepmother. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't a random sale. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a calculated, deliberate act. Jessica wasn't just a stranger. She was Linda's family. I immediately called Sarah. "You're not going to believe this," I said, my voice shaking with a fresh wave of anger. "Jessica, the buyer, she's Linda's niece." "What?" Sarah gasped. "Are you serious? So they sold the house to their own family member for a massive discount?" "Exactly," I said, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just my dad being weak and needing money. This was a plan. They schemed to keep the house in their family. They cut me out completely. "And the low price," Sarah said, thinking out loud. "They probably had a side deal. Jessica pays them $400,000 on paper and then gives them a huge chunk of cash under the table. They avoid taxes. She gets a house for a steal, and you get nothing." It made perfect, horrible sense. They had laundered my inheritance. They had stolen it, wrapped it up in a legal-looking package, and handed it over to one of their own. And my father's performance, the key, the emotional speech, it was all a smokescreen. It was designed to placate me, to make me feel grateful and happy so I wouldn't look too closely at the details. It was designed to make me the fool. The anger I felt was so pure, so white-hot, it burned away the last of my tears. This was no longer just about a house. This was about justice. It was about my mother's memory. They had conspired to erase her, to erase me, and replace us with their own family. I knew what I had to do next. I couldn't confront my dad on the phone again. He would just lie and gaslight me. I had to face them both. Together. I drove to their new apartment. It was in a modern, soulless building that looked like every other new construction in the city. A far cry from the warmth and character of my mother's house. I didn't call ahead. I wanted the element of surprise. I buzzed their apartment, and after a moment, Linda's voice crackled through the intercom. "Hello?" "It's Clara," I said, my voice cold and even. There was a pause. "Oh, Clara, what a surprise. Mark isn't here right now." "That's fine," I said. "It's you I want to talk to." Another pause, longer this time. Then the buzzer sounded, unlocking the main door. I took the elevator up to the 5th floor. My heart was a hammer against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I was done being the victim. Linda opened the apartment door just a crack, as if to block me from entering. She was wearing a silk robe and had a tight, forced smile on her face. "Clara, to what do we owe the pleasure?" "Cut the act, Linda," I said, pushing the door open and stepping inside. "I know about Jessica." The smile vanished from her face. Her eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Jessica Albright," I said, watching her carefully. "The woman who is buying my mother's house. Or should I say, your niece?" Linda's face went pale. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her silence was a confession. "So this was your idea, wasn't it?" I continued, my voice low and shaking with fury. "Convince my dad to sell the house, but keep it in the family. Your family. Get it for a steal. Pay him off under the table. And just hope I'm too stupid or too sentimental to notice." "It was your father's decision," she said, her voice turning sharp and defensive. Her friendly facade had completely crumbled, revealing the hard, selfish woman underneath. "He needed the money. We needed the money. And Jessica made a fair offer." "A fair offer?" I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "She paid less than half of what that house is worth. You call that fair?" "I call it theft." "You are so entitled," she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you're owed everything just because your mother died. Well, newsflash, life goes on. Your father has a new life now, a new family. We have needs. That house was just sitting there, an asset going to waste." "It wasn't an asset," I shot back. It was my home. It was my mother's legacy. And you treated it like a piece of junk to be sold for parts. It's just a house, she yelled, her composure finally breaking. Bricks and wood. You need to grow up and get over it. Just then, the door opened and my father walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. He stopped dead when he saw me, his eyes widening in panic. He looked from my furious face to Linda's. Clara, what's going on? He asked, his voice weak. I know, Dad, I said, turning my gaze on him. He flinched. I know you sold the house to Linda's niece. I know you lied to me. He dropped the grocery bag. An apple rolled across the floor. He looked trapped, a cornered animal. Now, let's not get hysterical, he began, falling back on his old, dismissive tone. Don't you dare, I said, taking a step toward him. Don't you dare talk down to me. You conspired with her to steal from me. You stole from your own daughter. We did what we had to do, Linda interjected, stepping in front of him, protecting him. He was drowning in debt. That house was the only way out. So you steal my inheritance to pay for your lifestyle? I demanded. And you lie about it? You perform this sick, twisted play where you pretend to be a loving father giving his daughter a gift? My dad wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the floor, the picture of pathetic cowardice. You need to drop this, Clara, he mumbled. It's done. The sale is final tomorrow. There's nothing you can do. I looked at them, standing there together, a united front of greed and deception. They thought they had won. They thought I was powerless. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, a deep, aching wound, but now it was surrounded by a wall of ice. You're wrong, I said, my voice quiet but filled with a certainty that surprised even me. This is not done. I turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving them standing there amidst the mess of their lies and a single, bruised apple on the floor. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I was not going to let them get away with it. They had started a war. I was going to finish it. Driving away from their apartment, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The confrontation had been ugly, but it had stripped away all the pretense. I knew exactly where I stood. It was me against them. The odds felt impossible, but the thought of letting them win was more impossible. My mind kept circling back to one thing. My mother. What would she have wanted? She had been a fighter. She was kind and gentle, but when it came to protecting her family, she was a lioness. She would never have stood for this. The thought of her gave me strength. I needed help. Not just emotional support from Sarah, but real, practical help. I needed someone who understood the law, someone who could fight them on their own turf. But lawyers cost money I didn't have. My father had always controlled the family finances, and since my mom's death, he'd kept me on a tight leash. It was another form of control, I realize now. Then I remembered someone. My Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister. After my mom died, my dad had systematically pushed her away. He'd claimed she was a bad influence, that she was trying to turn me against him. The truth, I now suspected, was that Carol was too much like my mother. She was smart, she was strong, and she saw right through him. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. The shame of that neglect washed over me, but I pushed it aside. I had to try. I found her number in my old contacts and dialed, my stomach twisting in knots. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was warm, just as I remembered. Aunt Carol? I said, my own voice small. It's Clara. There was a moment of surprised silence. Clara, honey, is that really you? Are you okay? The genuine concern in her voice was almost enough to make me break down again. I'm not okay, I admitted, my voice trembling. I need your help. Something has happened. I told her everything, the whole sordid story, from the key to the confrontation with my dad and Linda. I didn't leave anything out. She listened without interrupting, the silence on her end of the line growing heavier with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. I was afraid she was angry with me for not staying in touch, for letting my dad push her away. "That man," she finally said, her voice a low, dangerous growl that I had never heard from her before. "I always knew he was weak, but I never thought he was this cruel. To do that to you. To do that to your mother's memory. I don't know what to do," I confessed. "They're finalizing the sale tomorrow. They told me there's nothing I can do." "They're wrong," she said, her voice suddenly sharp and focused. "They are very, very wrong. Clara, did your mother have a will?" I think so," I said. I was young. Dad handled everything. He told me she left everything to him and that he would take care of me. Aunt Carol made a sound of disgust. "Of course he did. That's a lie. Your mother was meticulous, she had a will, and she had a trust set up. I know she did. We talked about it. She wanted to make sure you were protected no matter what." My heart started beating faster. A trust? I had never heard anything about a trust. "What kind of trust?" I asked. "She had our family lawyer, Mr. Miller, set it up," Carol explained. "The house, her main asset, was put into a testamentary trust. It was meant to be held for you. Your father was named as the trustee, which means he was supposed to manage it on your behalf, but he wasn't supposed to be the beneficiary." The legal terms were confusing, but the core idea was starting to break through the fog of my confusion. So, he was just in charge of it? It wasn't his to sell? "Not exactly," she said. "As trustee, he would have some power to sell, but there would have been strict conditions. It would have to be for your direct benefit. And it would absolutely have to be sold at full market value. Selling it for a massive loss to a family member of his new wife? That's not just immoral, Clara. That is illegal. It's called a breach of fiduciary duty, and it's a very serious offense." A bombshell had just gone off in my quiet, miserable life. He didn't have the right. The whole foundation of his argument, that it was his house to do with as he pleased, was a lie. "Can you prove it?" I asked, my voice filled with a desperate hope. "Can we find the will?" "The trust documents?" "I have my own copy of the will," she said calmly. "Your mother gave it to me for safekeeping years ago, just in case. She never trusted Mark completely with important paperwork. The trust documents should be on file with Mr. Miller's office. He's retired now, but his firm is still active. I'll call them first thing in the morning." I felt a surge of adrenaline, of power. This was it. This was the weapon I needed. "Aunt Carol," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. I'm so sorry I didn't—" "Shh," she interrupted gently. "Don't you worry about that. We're family. Your mother was my sister. We're going to fix this. You just stay strong." We talked for a little while longer, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The next morning felt like the longest of my life. I paced my small apartment, waiting for Carol's call. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leaped into my throat. Finally, around 10 o'clock, her name flashed on the screen. "I have them," she said without any preamble. "I'm sending you the scans right now. It's exactly as I remembered. The house was placed in the Clara Benson Trust. Your father is the trustee. The terms are crystal clear. The property is to be maintained for your benefit until you turn 30, at which point the deed transfers to you. It can only be sold before then under extreme circumstances for your demonstrated welfare, and only at a price determined by at least 2 independent appraisers." My knees felt weak. I sat down heavily on my sofa. It was all there. The proof. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had broken the law. He had committed fraud. "What do I do now?" I asked, looking at the documents as they came through to my email. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was unmistakable. "I spoke to a lawyer at Mr. Miller's old firm," Carol said. "His name is David Chen. He's already looked over the documents. He said we have an ironclad case. He can file for an emergency injunction to stop the sale immediately." An injunction. The word sounded powerful, final. Will it work? The sale is supposed to close today. He's confident it will, she said. The moment a judge sees these documents and compares them to the sale agreement, the whole thing will be frozen. Your father will have some very serious questions to answer. I thought about my father, about his condescending tone, his lies, his cowardice. I thought about Linda with her sneering entitlement. They thought they were safe. They thought they had outsmarted me. A cold, hard smile touched my lips. Before we file the injunction, I said slowly, an idea forming in my mind. I want to do one more thing. I want to give him a chance to fix this himself. Clara, are you sure? Carol asked, concern in her voice. He doesn't deserve a chance. I know, I said. This isn't for him. It's for me. I want to see his face when he realizes he's lost. I don't want to just win in a courtroom. I want him to know that I beat him. There was a pause, and then Carol said, just like your mother. All right, honey, you do it your way, but be careful. And know that we have the big guns ready to go the second you give the word. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding with a different kind of emotion now. It wasn't fear or sadness. It was the thrilling, terrifying feeling of holding all the cards. I looked at my phone, at my father's contact information. It was time to make one last call. I took a few deep breaths to steady my nerves. I needed to be calm, controlled. I couldn't let him hear any weakness in my voice. I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring, his voice wary. Clara? Hello, Dad, I said, my tone flat and businesslike. We need to talk. I have nothing more to say to you, he said, trying to sound firm, but I could hear the tremor underneath. You were completely out of line yesterday. I don't think so, I replied smoothly. Actually, I was just getting started. I had a very interesting conversation last night. I spoke to Aunt Carol. There was a sharp intake of breath on his end of the line. Complete and utter silence. I had thrown the first stone, and I could tell it had hit its mark. She seems to remember Mom's will a little differently than you do, I continued, letting the words hang in the air between us. I was dangling the hook, waiting to see if he would bite. He finally found his voice, but it was strained, defensive. Carol is a bitter woman. She's always been jealous of your mother. She doesn't know what she's talking about. That's funny, I said, my voice still deceptively light. Because she seemed to know exactly what she was talking about. She talked about a will. She talked about a trust. She talked about a lawyer named Mr. Miller. The silence that followed was so profound I thought he might have hung up. I could picture him perfectly, standing in his new, sterile apartment, the color draining from his face. He was realizing that the past he thought he had buried was coming back to haunt him. She sent me the documents, Dad, I said, delivering the final, decisive blow. The trust documents, the ones that say you couldn't sell the house, the ones that name you as trustee and detail your fiduciary duty to me. He made a strange, strangled sound, a mix of a gasp and a sob. The game was over. He knew it. What do you want, Clara? He whispered, all the fight gone from his voice. He sounded like what he was, a small, frightened man who had been caught. What I want is very simple, I said. And now my voice was as cold and hard as steel. You are going to call Jessica Albright, and you are going to cancel the sale of the house. You are going to tell her there was a legal error and the property cannot be transferred. You are going to handle whatever fallout comes from that. Then you are going to go to a lawyer and sign a quitclaim deed, transferring the ownership of the house to me, free and clear, exactly as the trust stipulated. I can't, he stammered. Jessica, she'll sue me. We've already spent some of the deposit money. That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem, I said, feeling a complete lack of sympathy. You created this mess. You will clean it up. Or I can have my lawyer clean it up for you. He's already prepared to file an emergency injunction to stop the sale. And after that, He's prepared to file a civil suit against you for breach of fiduciary duty and fraudulent conveyance. We'll see you in court. We'll present the will, the trust, and the sales agreement with your new niece-in-law. We'll let a judge decide what happens to you then. I let the threat settle in the silence. He knew what that meant. Public humiliation, legal fees that would bankrupt him, and potentially criminal charges. He had tried to steal a few $100,000, and now he was at risk of losing everything. You have 24 hours to make a decision, Dad, I said. Cancel the sale and give me my house, or I will see you in court. The choice is yours. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was from the sheer, unadulterated power of the moment. I had taken back control. The pawn had just put the king in check. Now all I had to do was wait for him to knock his own pieces over. The next 24 hours were a blur of nervous energy. I kept my phone on, the volume turned all the way up, waiting for it to ring. I spoke to Aunt Carol and my lawyer, David Chen, updating them on the ultimatum. They were both ready to act the moment I gave the word. Sarah brought over pizza and tried to distract me with a movie, but I couldn't focus. My entire future felt like it was hanging in the balance. The call didn't come from my father. It came from a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Is this Clara Benson?" A woman's sharp, angry voice demanded. "Yes, who is this?" I asked. "This is Jessica Albright," she snapped. "What in the world is going on? Your father just called me, babbling about some legal issue and trying to back out of the sale. We are supposed to close in 3 hours. My money is in escrow." "What did you do?" I took a slow, deliberate breath. So, he had blinked. He had made the call. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. "Hello, Jessica," I said, my voice calm and collected. "What I did was discover that my father sold you a property he didn't have the legal right to sell. The house is part of a trust. The sale is invalid." "Invalid?" she shrieked. "I have a signed contract. I'll sue him for everything he's worth." "That's between you and him," I said coolly. "My only concern is my property. And I can assure you the sale will not be going through. I have a lawyer and the trust documents to prove it. Any attempt to close on the house will be met with an immediate injunction and a lawsuit." She cursed loudly, a string of words that made me wince, and then she hung up. I stared at my phone, a slow smile spreading across my face. It was working. The entire scheme was imploding just as I had planned. The rats were turning on each other. Less than an hour later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw them. My father and Linda standing side by side on my doorstep. They looked awful. My dad's face was gray and haggard. Linda's was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. This was it. The final confrontation. I opened the door. I didn't invite them in. I just stood there, blocking the entrance, waiting. "You have to call off your lawyer," my father blurted out, his voice cracking with desperation. "Jessica is threatening to sue. You're destroying this family." I looked at him, at this man who had so thoroughly and casually broken my heart, and I felt nothing but a cold, empty pity. "You destroyed this family," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. "You destroyed it when you stole my inheritance. You destroyed it when you stood in your apartment and lied to my face. This is just you cleaning up your own mess." "We did what we had to do," Linda hissed, pushing past him to stand in front of me. Her eyes were blazing with hatred. "We needed the money. You have no idea what it's like, the debts he had. You sit here in your little apartment judging us. You needed money so badly that you sold $1 million house to your niece for $400,000? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "That doesn't sound like a desperate move, Linda. That sounds like a plan. A greedy, stupid plan. Tell me, how much was she going to pay you under the table? Another 100,000? 200? Was that your price for my mother's memory?" Linda recoiled as if I had slapped her. My father just shook his head, looking utterly defeated. "Stop it, Clara," he pleaded. This isn't how it happened. The denial, even now, was breathtaking. I felt my composure crack, and the present tense immediacy of the confrontation took over. This is exactly how it happened, I said, my voice rising, my gaze locked on his. And now I am giving you a choice. You have two options. Option one, you go to a lawyer, today, and you sign the deed to the house over to me. You will use the deposit money you got from Jessica to pay her back, and you will handle any legal trouble she decides to give you out of your own pocket. The house becomes mine, as it was always meant to be, and I walk away. I paused, letting the weight of that offer sink in. Option two, I continued, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. You refuse. And my lawyer, Mr. Chen, files the lawsuit this afternoon. We will go to court, and I will stand up in front of a judge and tell them everything. About the will, about the trust, about the illegal sale, about your conspiracy with your wife to defraud me. And we will let the legal system sort out your punishment. They stared at me, their faces a mixture of shock and horror. They had never seen me like this. They had always seen me as the quiet, dutiful daughter. They had never imagined I had a spine of steel. My father looked at Linda. Her face was contorted with rage, but also with fear. She knew they were trapped. She knew I had them. The public humiliation, the financial ruin, the very real possibility of criminal charges. It was too much. The risk was too great. He turned back to me, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He looked old and small and pathetic. Okay, he whispered, the word barely audible. Okay, Clara, you win. Those were the words I had been waiting to hear. But they didn't bring the rush of triumph I had expected. They just left a hollow feeling in my chest. I had won, yes, but I had lost my father a long time ago. This was just the official confirmation. The aftermath was as messy as I had anticipated. My dad and Linda had to scramble to get out of their contract with Jessica. She was furious, and rightly so. She had been a willing participant in the scheme, but she was also a victim of their incompetence. She threatened a massive lawsuit for breach of contract. In the end, they settled. My father had to return her deposit, plus a hefty penalty, which he paid for by liquidating a large portion of his retirement account. The dream of a comfortable, downsized life he and Linda had planned was gone, replaced by the grim reality of their financial folly. My father did as I had demanded. He signed the quitclaim deed, and after a few weeks of legal paperwork, my mother's house was officially, irrevocably mine. I didn't speak to him throughout the process. All communication went through our lawyers. Aunt Carol was my rock through it all. She helped me navigate the legal system, and more importantly, she helped me navigate the emotional fallout. I'm so proud of you, she told me over coffee one afternoon after the deed was officially recorded in my name. You stood up for yourself, and you stood up for your mother. She would be so, so proud of you. Tears pricked my eyes. I feel like I lost him forever, I admitted. Honey, she said, taking my hand, you lost him a long time ago. You just finally stopped pretending he was someone he's not. Sometimes that's the bravest thing a person can do. We became closer than ever before. We started having dinner every Sunday, a tradition my mother and I used to have. In a way, by fighting for her house, I had found a piece of her family that I thought was lost to me forever. My dad tried to call me once, about a month after everything was settled. I saw his name flash on the screen and my stomach twisted into a knot. I let it go to voicemail. He left a rambling, self-pitying message about how I didn't understand, how he had been under so much pressure, how he had always loved me. It was the same old script, the same old excuses. I didn't call him back. I sent him a single text message. There is nothing left to say. He never tried to contact me again. I heard through the grapevine that his relationship with Linda was strained to the breaking point. The financial stress and the bitterness of their failed scheme had poisoned whatever they had together. They had gambled my inheritance and lost, and now they were left to live with the consequences. Sarah helped me move into the house. It was a strange feeling, walking through the front door with boxes of my own things. The soulless staging furniture was gone, leaving the rooms echoey and empty. But it was a good kind of empty. It was a blank canvas. "So, you live here now?" she asked, looking around the living room with a wide smile. "For real this time?" "For real this time," I said, the words feeling solid and true. "It's finally mine." We spent weeks painting, cleaning, and slowly making the house a home again. I brought my own furniture, my own books, my own life into the empty spaces. With each new picture I hung on the wall, it felt less like a museum of the past and more like a foundation for the future. One rainy Saturday, I was up in the attic, going through some of my mom's old storage boxes that my dad had never bothered to clear out. They were filled with photo albums, old letters, and dusty trinkets from her life. At the bottom of one box, wrapped in a piece of faded velvet cloth, I found a small, heavy object. I unwrapped it. It was a keychain holding 2 brass keys. They were slightly different from the one my father had given me. They were older, more worn, with a different pattern on the head. I took them downstairs and on a whim tried one in the front door lock. It slid in perfectly and turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I looked at the key in my hand, my mother's real key. Then I thought about the one my father had given me, the one that was probably sitting in a junk drawer in his apartment. It wasn't a spare he had forgotten to return. The lock had been changed years ago after a break-in scare. The key he gave me was useless. He must have had a copy made, a prop for his little play, a shiny, worthless object designed to fool me. The depth of his deception, the sheer premeditation of it, hit me with a fresh wave of clarity. He hadn't just lied in the moment. He had planned the lie, crafted it, and rehearsed it. He had manufactured a prop to make his betrayal more convincing. Holding my mother's real keys, I felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. He had never had any real power over this house. He was just a temporary guardian who had failed in his duty. The house and the love it contained had always belonged to my mother. And now, it belonged to me. I walked through the quiet rooms of my home, and I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The fight was over. I had won back my inheritance, my history, and my future. But I had won something more important. I had won my freedom from him. I stopped waiting for him to be the father I needed him to be. I stopped hoping for an apology that would never come. He had finally shown me exactly who he was. And this time, I believed him. He had taught me a valuable lesson. Some people will only learn the value of what they have when they are forced to lose it. And I had learned that I was strong enough to be the one to take it from them. The house was quiet, filled with the promise of my own life. And for the first time, it felt truly, completely mine.